The operations floor of the forward intelligence base hummed with the quiet electricity of machines and voices layered over one another. Screens flickered with satellite images, scrolling lines of intercepted transmissions, and blinking blue icons marking friendly patrol routes across the valley. Lieutenant Mara Hayes sat at the far end of the intercept analysis table, headphones resting around her neck and a tablet glowing in her hands. She had been watching the same pattern for nearly 3 hours, replaying fragments of encrypted chatter that the automated system had flagged as low priority. To the others in the room, the transmissions sounded like meaningless bursts of static and half-translated dialect. To Mara, they sounded wrong. Across the room, senior analysts laughed quietly about a football match playing silently on one of the side screens. Coffee cups cluttered their desks, and no one seemed particularly concerned about the intercept feed trickling into the system. The valley outside had been quiet for weeks, which was exactly what bothered Mara. She tapped a marker on her screen and replayed the recording again. A male voice, faint and distorted. Another voice responding. Then coordinates. But the coordinates weren't for a location. They were for a route. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up a map of the valley. Thin digital lines traced the patrol route scheduled for later that afternoon, an armored convoy escorting supply trucks from the base to a remote outpost. She overlaid the coordinates she had extracted. They intersected the route at 3 separate points. Her stomach tightened. "That's not random chatter," she murmured. She stood and walked toward the central analyst table where 2 senior intercept specialists were reviewing drone imagery. "Hey," she said calmly. "Can I show you something?" One of them, Sergeant Blake Turner, barely glanced up. "If it's another ghost signal, Hayes, log it and move on." "It's not a ghost signal." She slid her tablet across the table. Turner sighed but looked down at the screen. "Intercept channel 14, Mara explained. 3 transmissions over the last 6 hours. Same voices, same encryption layer. I mapped the coordinates." Turner squinted. "Those aren't coordinates, they're route markers." He leaned back in his chair. "For what?" She tapped the map overlay. "Our convoy route." Another analyst chuckled. "You're saying insurgents somehow know our convoy schedule and just conveniently talked about it on an interceptable channel?" "Yes," Mara said firmly. Turner shook his head. "Hayes, the valley's been dead quiet. Recon teams haven't seen activity in weeks." "Exactly. That means they're gone." "No," she said quietly. "It means they're waiting." A third analyst leaned over. "You're new here, right?" 3 months. He smiled politely. "Then here's a lesson. Insurgents don't broadcast ambush plans on radio channels we can hear." Mara crossed her arms. "Unless they want us to hear something else." Turner pushed the tablet back toward her. "Log the intercept and move on." "But the convoy leaves in 4 hours. And if we stopped every convoy because of a maybe, we'd never move anything anywhere." The room returned to its low murmur of conversations. Mara stared at the map on her tablet. 3 intersection points. 3 possible ambush sites. Her jaw tightened. She returned to her workstation. If they wouldn't listen to the intercept data, she would find proof. Her screen displayed the feed from a small reconnaissance drone stationed at the edge of the base runway. An RQ-11 Raven. Lightweight, silent, short range, perfect. She glanced toward the operations supervisor across the room. "Sir." He looked up. "Yes, Lieutenant. Request permission to launch. Raven drone for route surveillance." He raised an eyebrow. "For what purpose?" "Routine terrain update before the convoy departs." He shrugged. "Fine. Keep it under 30 minutes. Mara nodded. "Thank you, sir." Minutes later she stood outside near the runway, the warm desert wind brushing against her uniform. She assembled the small drone quickly, attaching its battery and folding wings. The Raven weighed barely 5 pounds. But right now it carried the weight of her instincts. She launched it with a smooth throw into the wind. The drone caught the air and climbed gracefully. Back inside the operations room, her monitor filled with live video. Dusty roads, rocky hills, dry riverbeds cutting through the valley. She guided the drone toward the convoy route. The first coordinate appeared ahead on the map overlay. Just a narrow bend in the road between 2 rocky ridges. Nothing unusual, but Mara lowered the drone slightly and zoomed in. Her eyes narrowed. Fresh tire tracks, not from civilian vehicles, large trucks, parked recently, then moved. Her pulse quickened. "Come on," she whispered. She steered the drone forward along the route. The second coordinate appeared, a shallow canyon crossing the road. She slowed the drone and tilted the camera downward. For several seconds, nothing appeared. Then, her breath caught. Half buried in the sand beside the road was a long cylindrical object. Too straight to be natural. Too deliberate to ignore. As that, she zoomed further. Metal casing. Wiring barely visible under the sand. An improvised explosive device. Her heart began pounding. Holy. She grabbed her headset. Operations, this is Lieutenant Hayes. I have visual confirmation of a roadside device along convoy route marker 2. The room fell silent. Turner turned around. Say again. I repeat. Possible IED at route marker 2. Sending live feed now. Every screen in the room switched to her drone footage. The cylindrical shape appeared clearly. No one laughed now. Turner leaned forward slowly. Zoom closer. Mara obeyed. The camera stabilized. The explosive device was unmistakable. Turner cursed under his breath. Damn. The operations supervisor stood. Continue surveillance. Mara guided the drone forward again. Her pulse raced. If there was one device, there would be more. The third coordinate approached. A narrow mountain pass where the road curved sharply between high stone walls. Perfect kill zone. She slowed the drone, then lowered altitude carefully. The camera angled down. For a moment the road looked empty. Then she noticed movement, a shadow shifting near the rocks. Her eyes widened. 3 figures crouched behind the ridge, armed, watching the road, waiting. The ambush team. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Contact confirmed. The room behind her erupted into urgent motion. The supervisor grabbed a radio. Convoy command, halt movement immediately. Turner stared at the drone feed in disbelief. They were really setting up an ambush. Mara kept the drone steady, tracking the figures below. One of them suddenly looked up. Directly at the drone. The man shouted something. The others scrambled for cover. They see us, Mara said. A rifle fired. A bullet snapped past the drone camera. Static flickered across the screen. Get it higher, Turner shouted. Mara pulled the controls upward. The Raven climbed rapidly. Another shot rang out. Then another. But the drone had already gained altitude. Out of rifle range. The ambush team scattered below. The supervisor spoke sharply into the radio. Convoy is returning to base. Quick reaction team deploy immediately. Mara leaned back in her chair, heart still racing. Turner looked at her. For the first time all day. He smiled. Guess those intercept signals weren't ghosts. After all. She exhaled slowly. No, he shook his head in disbelief. You just saved 30 soldiers. Across the room, the supervisor added quietly. And exposed an entire ambush network. Mara looked back at the drone feed. The valley below looked calm again. Silent. But now everyone in the room understood the truth. Sometimes the smallest signal was the warning that saved lives. The operations room had transformed in seconds. What had been a relaxed intelligence floor only minutes earlier was now alive with tension, radios crackling, keyboards clattering, and officers moving quickly between stations. Lieutenant Mara Hayes kept her hands steady on the drone controls, though her pulse was still racing. The Raven drone circled high above the valley, its small electric motor humming softly as it transmitted the live feedback to the base. Below, the 3 insurgents she had spotted moments earlier were disappearing into the rocks. Don't lose them, Sergeant Turner said quietly beside her. I won't. Mara zoomed in as much as the small drone allowed. The figures moved quickly through the canyon walls, clearly trained and familiar with the terrain. They disappeared beneath an overhang where the shadows swallowed them. Damn, Turner muttered, but Mara shook her head. They're not leaving. How do you know? She tapped another control, widening the camera view. Because they're waiting for the rest of their team. Across the operations floor, the base commander had arrived. Colonel Nathan Briggs stepped into the room with the calm presence of someone who had spent decades in combat zones. His eyes moved across the screens until they landed on Mara's drone feed. What are we looking at? The operations supervisor answered immediately. Lieutenant Hayes intercepted suspicious chatter this morning. Analysts dismissed it, but she launched a Raven drone and confirmed multiple IEDs and an ambush team along the convoy route. The colonel studied the screen silently. The buried explosive device appeared clearly on the camera feed. Convoy status, already turned back to base, sir. The colonel nodded once. Good call. He looked at Mara. You're the one who spotted this? Yes, sir. Keep that drone in the air. Yes, sir. Outside the base walls, the valley stretched wide and silent beneath the midday sun. From above it looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But Mara knew better now. She guided the drone slowly along the canyon walls. The ambush team had vanished into a cluster of caves carved into the rock face. Thermal overlay, Turner suggested. She switched the camera mode. The screen flickered briefly before shifting to thermal imaging. 3 heat signatures glowed faintly within the cave entrance. Still there, she said. Turner leaned closer. They're probably waiting for confirmation that the convoy is still coming. The colonel crossed his arms. Let them wait. He turned toward the operations team. Deploy the quick reaction force. Quiet approach. A captain near the back of the room grabbed a headset. QRF team, prepare for deployment. The soldiers stationed at the base had already begun gearing up. Within minutes armored vehicles rolled quietly toward the gate. Mara kept the drone circling. Her headset crackled. Lieutenant Hayes, the colonel said calmly, you're now our eyes. Yes, sir. Guide them in. Her throat tightened slightly. She had analyzed intercept data for months. But now real soldiers on the ground were depending on her. The quick reaction force vehicles left the base and began moving across the valley floor. From above, Mara watched their icons move slowly along a safer alternate route. Turner pointed to a narrow ridge on the map. Have them approach from the west. That keeps them out of the ambush team's line of sight. Mara relayed the instructions through the radio. The convoy adjusted course. Minutes passed slowly. The drone battery indicator dropped from 60% to 50%. Plenty of time. The thermal camera still showed the insurgents waiting inside the cave, completely unaware that the convoy they planned to attack had never left the base. And that soldiers were now approaching them instead. The colonel watched quietly. Patience, he said. On Mara's screen, the quick reaction team reached the ridge overlooking the canyon. Their vehicles stopped. Soldiers dismounted silently and began advancing on foot. Through the drone camera, Mara could see them moving carefully between the rocks. One soldier paused and raised binoculars toward the cave entrance. He saw the same heat signatures she had. His radio crackled. Visual confirmation. Turner smiled. They walked right into their own trap. The colonel nodded slightly. Proceed. Moments later the soldiers surrounded the cave entrance. Flashbang grenades flew inside. 2 loud concussions echoed through the canyon. Then shouting. Within seconds the 3 insurgents were dragged out and forced to the ground. No shots fired. No casualties. The room exhaled as one. Turner leaned back in his chair. Well, Lieutenant Hayes, he said, looks like you just made a lot of people very happy. Mara watched the drone feed quietly. But she wasn't satisfied yet. Sir, she said slowly. The colonel looked at her. Yes, this was only the ambush team. He nodded. Yes, the intercept chatter mentioned a transport truck. Turner frowned. Transport truck. She pulled up the intercept transcript again. The voice said the truck would arrive after the convoy was destroyed. The colonel's expression hardened. So the ambush was just phase 1. Mara nodded. They were planning to recover something after the attack. Turner leaned forward again. What kind of truck? Unknown. The colonel looked at the map. Can your drone scan the surrounding roads? Yes, sir. Do it. Mara redirected the Raven drone eastward along a narrow dirt road that wound through the valley. The camera scanned slowly across the landscape. Minutes passed. Then something appeared on the horizon. A large vehicle moving slowly across the desert road. Contact, Mara said. She zoomed in. Dust trailed behind a heavy cargo truck. Turner squinted at the screen. That's not a civilian vehicle. The truck stopped suddenly. The driver's door opened. 2 armed men stepped out. They looked toward the canyon. Waiting. The colonel spoke calmly. That's their support team. Turner nodded. They're waiting for confirmation the ambush worked. Mara adjusted the drone's altitude slightly. The truck bed was covered with a tarp. What do you think they're transporting? Turner asked. Mara zoomed further. One of the men pulled the tarp back briefly. Just long enough for the camera to catch a glimpse. Long metal tubes, packed carefully in crates. Mara's eyes widened. Sir. The colonel stepped closer. What is it? Rockets. Turner swore under his breath. Anti-vehicle launchers. The colonel's voice hardened. They planned to bring those into the valley after the convoy was destroyed. Probably for future attacks, Turner said. The colonel grabbed the radio. QRF team, redirect to new target. Mara transmitted the coordinates. The soldiers who had just captured the ambush team quickly moved back toward their vehicles. The truck drivers still stood beside the vehicle, unaware. From above, Mara watched everything unfold. Her drone battery dropped to 30%. Still enough. The armored vehicles approached from the ridge. The truck crew finally noticed them. One man reached for his rifle. But it was already too late. The quick reaction team surrounded the truck in seconds. The suspect surrendered immediately. Within minutes the rockets were secured. The colonel leaned back slightly. Well, he said quietly. That explains the radio chatter. Turner turned toward Mara. You realize what you just prevented? She shook her head slightly. A major weapons delivery. The colonel nodded. Enough rockets to attack every patrol in this valley. Silence filled the operations room for a moment. Then the colonel spoke again. Lieutenant Hayes. Yes, sir. Excellent work today. Thank you, sir. Turner chuckled. Next time you say you hear something strange on the intercept channel. He shrugged. I'm listening. The room relaxed again as the soldiers began transporting the captured weapons back to base. Mara guided the drone back toward the runway. The battery indicator blinked red. 5%. She landed the Raven smoothly. When she stepped away from the control station, several analysts who had ignored her earlier gave her quiet nods of respect. Turner handed her a fresh cup of coffee. You earned it. She smiled slightly. Thanks. Later that evening, the sun dipped behind the mountains surrounding the base. The valley looked peaceful again. But dozens of soldiers were alive because one analyst refused to ignore a strange signal. Inside the operations room, the colonel addressed the team. Today is a reminder, he said calmly. Intelligence is only useful if someone has the courage to trust their instincts. He looked toward Mara, and Lieutenant Hayes did exactly that. The room applauded lightly. Mara felt her face warm slightly. But she knew the truth. She had simply done her job. Still, sometimes doing your job meant refusing to stay silent. Even when no one else believed you.